Do you want to try to?
Okay. All right, we're going to get started. It's 10 o'clock and it's Arlington Neighborhood Village. We have Wendy Zenker, our executive director. You want to wave and say hi, and then you can go back to what you were doing unless you want to hang with us for a while.
Well, I would love to, but I can't.
It's a busy day.
Right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to leave. Call me on my cell if there's anything that I can help with.
Wendy,
Well,
before you leave, can you enable the closed captions?
Let me see if I
would
can
be
do
me.
that.
That would be me.
Request the host enable the live captions. So
Right.
that's Anita.
I'm going. I'm using a different machine. How's that, Steve?
It's been enabled, it says.
Okay, very good. And our chat box is open. We're going to use Carol, our diehard, our wonderful, I shouldn't say diehard, but our stalwart host, Gary Iserman, is not able to get into the session today. So we are going to limp along on myself, Anita Walgren, and Carolyn Johnson. And good thing that our speaker, Steve Angel, is with us. Jim Angel, and he is a Zoom expert, so that's good. I see, Carolyn, why don't you keep an eye on the chat and let us know if anything pops in there that we should pay attention to, including questions. But before we get started, Jim, I do talk a little bit, if it's okay, to explain the mission of Arlington Neighborhood Village. Don't know if you've heard about villages around the country, but these are volunteer organizations. We've been in business for about 8 years now, and we have over 400 volunteers in Arlington or around Arlington. The volunteers are the backbone of the organization, and they provide all kinds of services and resources, friendship, and behind the scenes work to help seniors in Arlington live independently and safely in their homes, getting to stay connected and make new friends. Interestingly, in Arlington, we have over 300 members at this point. There is an annual membership fee for members, and then there is a financial assistance program so that we have not had to turn away anybody on the basis of financial need. The other thing that we've learned over the years is we've stayed, I think, true to the mission. At the beginning, the founders really wanted this to be a friendly organization and one that is growing and modifying our work as we learn from our members. What do they need? What do they want us to do? And one of the key things has been to develop a lot of opportunities to make social connections, to get out of the house, to gather in safe places together and learn continually about all kinds of new and interesting and important things. So aren't we glad that we've learned about Zoom? And today we are really
learning more every day.
We are testing our limits today, I think, in terms of being able to step in and do things. But COVID, I hardly need to say, has been a terrible challenge for the organization. All of the social services, especially in Arlington, where we are based, have done a great job in identifying the special needs for different kinds of people, especially seniors who have had this situation thrust upon ourselves, a lot of uncertainty. But we have worked hard with the county and the county resources to make sure people understood what the risks were, how quickly to get vaccinated. I'm not sure about boosting the second booster now. And fortunately, Carolyn, I think I'm right, next week is our week to have Dr. Varghese, the head of public health in Arlington County. So anybody who by then, maybe he'll be able to tell us whether we should be signing up for our second boosters. And also we do every Wednesday this free, open to the public coffee.
Anita, Steve has a question. Steve
has
has
a
question.
Actually, I have a comment. Boosters are available to us because we're over 50 years old at Arlington Mill and Walter Reed Community Centers, they're open from 11 to 7.
Yes, thanks, Steve. The thing though that I have been reading is even the public health officials in the federal level have been suggesting that maybe we need to wait a little bit, wait and see how the new strains develop and so on. But that is good to know. Our county is already waiting for you if you want to go sign up, Walter Reed and Arlington Mill.
I think that's what he said.
Yeah. All right, onward. Anybody else have any questions or comments about Arlington Neighborhood Village as of today? We, as always, have a long list of activities. If you are a member or volunteer, you receive twice a month an email with opportunities to do service, to participate in our activities, and to participate even in other village talks. And 55 Plus is one of our partners that's run through the Arlington Parks and Rec organization. We also have a consumer checkbook partnership. Our Health and Wellness Committee is doing all kinds of talks. I'm looking forward, I think Carolyn, who is our volunteer also with me, is lining up speakers for coffee and conversation. Looking forward to that Marymount talk. What is the name of that? What is the name of that facility?
The Center for something in aging.
Optimal?
Optimal, yeah, Center for Optimal Aging.
Well, that is at Marymount, and that's going to be a very interesting new development. They have several of their students are focused on healthcare careers, and this is a perfect fit for those students who want to focus on senior health, senior life. Anything else in the chat today so far?
Yes, somebody was asking about Tom Schladiger's passing.
No, I don't know anything about that. But you know, if you have any questions about an A and B member or volunteer, the office number is 703-509-8057. And Jean Raday is our membership services manager, and she would be able to tell you whatever information is available. I think with that, I'm going to quickly turn it to Jim Angel.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm doing this on my phone from a swimming pool in Florida. I apologize. I know Tom Schlager. He did pass away. His service is going to be live streamed from St. Aidan's Church in Nassau County in New York on Friday. And you can find, there's some information at the St. Aidan's Church website, but the service is, I think, 11 o'clock on Friday. He did pass away on May 5th.
Okay, and who is speaking?
If anyone else knew him. He was the best man in our wedding. But anyway.
Who is speaking?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm new at this too. Elaine Eder.
Elaine
I get
Suter?
your stuff. Yeah, Eder, E-D-E-R.
Okay, what's the
I get
connection
your stuff
with
through Hyde Park.
Arlington? What's the
I get your
connection?
stuff through Hyde Park.
Okay. Well,
Hyde Park condo.
I suggest that you let the office at Arlington Neighborhood Village know those details about the service, Elaine.
Okay, I'll try to do that. As I said, I'm with my grandson who's 18 months old here in Florida.
Okay.
So I'm having trouble focusing on macaroni and cheese. But
Yeah.
just wanted to let you know
Okay.
about Tom. If
We're all
anybody knew him.
multitasking. Okay, very good.
Okay. I'll
Thank
try
you.
to mute again. Thank
All
you.
right, very good. Jim, we are so happy to have you. I also see a few of our board members and A and B leadership on the call. I'm not going to take time though, because we had a little bumpy entry into this session today, and we're going to move right along. So Jim, when you start your talk today, this is so incredibly timely. We are so lucky to have you. And I think I found you because you had done another talk to another group. So I hope this wasn't too burdensome to set up your slides for us.
Oh,
But-
not a problem. I was just able to recycle a lot of my slides. Real quick question. How long would you like me to speak for?
our session will end at 11. So if you could plan to move through your slides in a half an hour, 45 minutes, would you like us to take questions as you go?
Yes, please.
All right. Then
Because if I
Carolyn
do
and
all the talking, I can put people to sleep real fast. So the more interactive we make it, the more fun it is for everybody.
All right. Well, what we do at this point is if Gary were here, we'd hear him say very kindly, everybody, please mute yourself if you haven't already. Looks like it's pretty well muted except for me and Carolyn. And Carolyn and I will monitor the chat box. And Jim, I have shared my screen with you, so you should be able to manage your slides. We have the captioning on. I suggest everybody switch to a gallery view so that you get the slides in the front and center of your screen. And Jim, we will ask you, it occurred to me this morning, I'd really like to know not only if you want to give your background on being a distinguished professor of finance at Georgetown and how that has been for you and your connection maybe with Washington, D.C. area and Georgetown, but when did you first hear about cryptocurrency, this alternative system, and why did you start to devote some time and effort in understanding it?
Oh, really great question. And I started off as an engineer. I went to Caltech, and so I've hung around with a techie crowd. One of the students I overlapped with was a guy by the name of Hal Finney, and he was the recipient on the first Bitcoin transaction. So, I've always been kind of hanging around the edges of that crowd. So it was in the early teens when I first heard about Bitcoin. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically, I started off as an engineer and I hung out with a bad crowd. Story of my life is I worked as an engineer, as an electrical engineer for a couple of years at Pacific Gas and Electric. Then I went off to business school, got an MBA from Harvard, discovered finance, went back to California, got a PhD from UC Berkeley. And then I came to Georgetown, where I've been hanging out ever since. And basically, I always like to really understand market plumbing and the inner details of how things really, really work. And so what I'd like to point out is there is a revolution going on in technology. That what we have now is a new technology that allows us to create digital bearer assets. Now, you know what a bearer asset is. Cash, physical paper cash is a bearer asset. Anybody who's, oh, wait a minute, I forgot something. Very first rule of public speaking is know your audience. Let me ask the audience a question here real quick. How many of you have ever bought anything with Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency? Okay. All right. Okay, that's good to know. All right. So anyways, cash is a bearer asset. Anybody who has this piece of cash, this piece of paper, is presumed to be the owner, and I can transfer it to anybody just by handing it to them. I don't have to wait for the bank to open or the Federal Reserve to open their wire room or any of that stuff. Very simple, very quick, very cheap, bang, done. All right. Well, this revolution allows us to transfer digital assets the same way, person to person, around the clock, around the world. Plus, with the beauty of technology, we can make these assets programmable. Imagine programmable money. Imagine money that you could send to your grandchild, but it could only be spent on textbooks at school. Okay. Or imagine donating to a charity and being able to see exactly what they spent that on. So these are just some of the possibilities that this technology brings up. So it's really a very exciting time to be around. So how did we get here? Well, you may remember long, long ago, 2008, we had this great financial crisis when everything seemed to be blowing up at once. And then somebody who was using the name Satoshi Nakamoto created this electronic payment system that did not require having a trusted intermediary, sitting in the middle like a bank. Now, nobody knows who Satoshi is. Now, there are people who claim to be Satoshi Nakamoto who can't prove it. There are people who have been accused of being Satoshi Nakamoto who deny it, but that just sort of adds to the mystery of Bitcoin. But what this technology does is it allows you to send any kind of a token of value from one person to another. And that token can represent money and spending power, or it could represent ownership of a share of stock or a piece of real estate. Think about it.
Hey, Jim, we have to stop here and ask you, are you Satoshi?
I deny it. I am not now, nor have I ever been Satoshi Nakamoto.
All right.
Okay, but think about it. You may remember paper stock certificates. And the nice thing about this crowd is some of you probably even remember the Penn Central Railroad. When I teach this to my undergrad students, they go, railroad? What's a railroad? Penn Central? Who are they? But basically, this stock certificate is just a token of value representing ownership. So we can do this electronically, and we can transfer it easily. And we can tokenize anything. And that's what we're seeing going on. But let's think about the payment problem. All right. So let's think about what happens when your kids take a picture of the grandchildren and send you a picture. All right. Well, in the old days, you'd get this physical picture and you knew there was just one. Now, they take a picture with a phone and email it to you. They've got a copy. You've got a copy. Every server along the way has a copy. The Chinese have a copy. The Russians have a copy. The CIA has a copy. Everybody's got a copy of it. So that would make it real hard with old technology to pay somebody, because think you could take a picture of the dollar bill, click, take a picture. But when you send it, everybody's got a copy. Now everybody could spend it, right? That's not going to work. Well, with blockchain technology, it's a secure way to transfer that token of value from one person to another in a way that everybody agrees, like, yeah, that just happened. Yep. And, so we often say that we've added a trust protocol to the internet. Now, you can use this technology for all kinds of amazing things. And this is why people just get so rapturous about it, because you can do it with all kinds of things other than just Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin is just the prototype. And there are differences of opinion as to where Bitcoin itself is going, but the technology is something which is really being widely adopted in a lot of different areas, many of which have nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. So you can, as I said, you can tokenize anything and transfer it in this way, whether it's a security, okay, a share of stock. You can also do it with collectibles. And that's where these so-called non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, are coming from. Fungible just means it's a perfect substitute. So dollar bills are fungible, okay? $1 bill is a perfect substitute for any other. They are all legal tender for all debts, public and private. So if I owe you $1, I can pay you with any dollar bill. You don't have to look at the serial number and say, no, I want to be paid with KN938701000I. No, we don't pay attention to it. If it's non-fungible, it's unique. It's a token that represents a very unique asset. It could be something mundane like the title to a car, or it could be a piece of art. It's just basically unique, and that's all it is. When they say it's a non-fungible token, it's unique. So we've seen, basically a lot of so-called NFTs in the art world, because the NFT just represents ownership of something. The actual piece of art is probably sitting on a server somewhere, and it could be a piece of digital art or a piece of physical art. But here's what's really cool. You can make these things programmable. So you can have the NFT programmed, or you could create one. Not all of them are programmable in this way. You could create an NFT such that every time that piece of art is resold, the artist gets a royalty. So the artist could share in the future growth in the value of that piece of art. Or you can do more. You can
Jim, we have a question. Is there or will there eventually be a way of implementing blockchain technology without the enormous energy requirements?
Yes, yes, yes. That's called proof of stake. And we'll get to that when we get into sort of the grungy details of how Bitcoin operates. But Steve, you're on the right path. I view Bitcoin 1.0 as a prototype with the safety, efficiency, and environmental impact of the Model T Ford. There are much, much better ways, much better cars now than the Model T. Cars we have are safer, they're more fuel efficient, and they're cleaner. So, we can move far beyond Bitcoin 1.0, even though many people are just sort of so in love with the technology, they go, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. But there are even better things out there than Bitcoin 1.0. So, but here's the really cool thing. You can make the art programmable. You can make it so maybe it will interact with the owner. Click here, see what happens. Maybe it can change over time. So, I'm not an art expert, but a lot of people kind of go, way cool. So let's get down into the weeds and talk about how Bitcoin's blockchain works. Now, it depends on so-called public-private key encryption, just like most of the internet does. So, that's a proven technology. Now, every Bitcoin is associated with an address, not an account. That's a big difference, okay? But it's just a number, all right? And with that address, there's a private key. You can think of that as password, okay? It's the number you need to unlock that particular Bitcoin. And that address also has a Bitcoin balance associated with it. And if you want to get into the real weeds, we call it an unspent output, or a UTXO. That'll be on the quiz. All right. So what do these public addresses look like? We call them public keys. Now, the public key is a big, long, ugly number, like this one. I won't read it all to you. And once again, I want to emphasize, this is not an account. It's not like, there's some institution you can walk into and say, hi, I'm 3 capital C, lower c, M, capital W, 1 F, C, W, D. What's my balance? No, it's a protocol, and it's a bunch of numbers that people have agreed upon as part of this protocol. Now, but if you have the private key, which is another ugly number, kind of like this one, you can digitally sign that and basically spend the balance that's associated with that particular public key. Now, this is really the very important thing to remember. Cybersecurity is so essential. Anyone who has that private key number can transfer, and that means steal, that Bitcoin balance. And if you lose that key, it's lost forever. You can't go back to somebody and say, I'd like to reset my private key, please. There's nobody to do that. So when they say it's just like cash, they mean it. You lose it, it's gone. And there are many colorful stories, I'm sure you may have heard some, of somebody who's accidentally threw out a hard drive with their Bitcoin keys on it, and now it's worth $1 billion. And so you have people literally digging through landfills looking for it, or other people that their hard drive crashed, or a hacker took all their money. Where did the assets go that get lost? If they've been stolen, somebody else might be spending them. But for the thing that goes into the landfill, it's basically lost forever. That number's disappeared. So here's an example of what a Bitcoin transaction looks like. So suppose Alice wants to send some Bitcoin to Bob. And in the descriptions, people are always talking about Alice A and Bob B. So Alice and Bob. So Alice has some Bitcoin that's associated with that address. 3, capital C, lower c, M, blah, 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 blah. And she wants to pay Bob. Bob is using the address 1LJJ, blah, blah, blah. All right. So what Alice will do is she has her private key, and she'll do that crypto jumbo of a digital signature and basically sign that and says, I want to send it to Bob. So she sends it off to the internet. And this is where the so-called miners come in. The miners are really nothing more than payment processors. But unlike having to go through Visa or MasterCard, anybody who wants to can actually mine Bitcoin. Now, you need a very powerful computer to do it with, and most people aren't going to make money paying retail electricity prices. But if you have the right kind of hardware and you can get really cheap electricity or steal it, then you can make money with the mining. Now, but the miners, these are just a bunch of computers. But we call them miners because they have the same environmental impact as a lot of mining activities, which is pretty bad. What they do is they check it and say, yes, that was properly digitally signed. And then what they do is they gather the transactions into a block and they verify the whole block. That's why they call it a blockchain, because they process these transactions one block at a time. And these blocks have some very nice properties. They're what we call cryptographically secure. Basically, if anybody tries to change just a single character in that block, it changes the digital fingerprint of the block, what we call a hash function, in such a way that everybody can instantly see that's been tampered with. So it's a very clever way of having a tamper-proof database where everybody can see what has happened. And that's the beauty of blockchain technology. It does create a public record of all the transactions that have occurred. So you can go back and basically see, what transactions have occurred with that particular address. And there are a lot of websites that let you do that. Now, I just want to reemphasize that one of the really nice things about this is the Bitcoin blockchain is a public blockchain. You can download the entire blockchain and see what addresses are transacting with what other addresses. That means anybody can audit a transaction. And this transparency gives you a lot of trust in the system. So these kind of blockchain systems are really useful almost anywhere you want really good accountability and transparency. So again, imagine donating money to a charity and seeing exactly how they spent it. Cool, huh? Now, I mentioned that these blockchain transactions are, Bitcoin transactions are very public. There are a lot of websites out there, like blockchain.com, coinmarketcap.com, where you can basically see what is going on, what addresses are spending money to whom. And this is what a typical Bitcoin transaction looks like. You have big, long, ugly number, is basically, essentially, it's the hash of the transaction. It's, basically, think of it as a transaction number. So this address is sending this much Bitcoin to these two addresses. And they typically do it that way because the way they set up Bitcoin 1.0 is you had to send the entire Bitcoin, and then you could send the change back to a different address if you want. And that's typically what people will do. And you can go to these websites and you can search these transactions, you can search every block, and you can see what's going on almost. Now, the problem is you don't know who's behind those addresses. So this is why some people think it's anonymous, but with enough hard work, you can, sometimes catch these people. Now, I mentioned that with Bitcoin, they process it by blocks. And the design of Bitcoin 1.0 is to do a block on average every 10 minutes. And every block can hold around 2,000 to 3,000 transactions. So it's really a very slow and clunky payment system. Brilliant invention, but again, I view it as a prototype, not the last thing that will ever happen. Now, how do these payment processors, the people we call the miners, get paid? Well, they get paid in two ways. When you send a Bitcoin transaction, there's a little fee. You basically get to choose the fee. You put in a tip, basically. And if you want your transaction processed in the next block, you put in a big tip. If you can sit back and wait, you put in a very small one. And if you don't put in any at all, you may be waiting a very long time. But basically, you get rewarded if you are one of those processors and you're the one who basically puts together that block. You get all the transaction fees associated with the block, and you get some newly issued Bitcoins. So that's where Bitcoins are created. The payment processors who do the work of processing these trades, they're the ones who get paid with newly issued Bitcoins. Now, every 4 years, they cut that reward. And that means there's going to be a theoretical limit of 21 million Bitcoins that can be mined. Now, that's a theoretical limit. It's based on the current protocol. The software has changed. It can change. It will change. But there's some people who pretend as if, this was handed down by God to Satoshi on Mount Sinai and can never be changed. It's a human construct is what it is. And, if you want to get into the weeds and we had more time, I could tell you scenarios where I think it might change, but that's controversial. But after all the newly created Bitcoins get mined, what then happens? Well, then the miners would just have to rely on the transaction fees, which right now are a couple dollars a transaction.
Here's a question about miners.
Yeah.
Who owns the miners? So tell us if they're individuals or have any companies gotten into organizing and calling themselves a mining corporation?
All of the above. And there are big economies of scale here. And so now you do have major corporations that are listed on our exchanges. You can buy shares in them. And there's a whole mining industry out there.
Can you give us a name of a Bitcoin mining corporation?
Let's see, there's Riot Blockchain, there's Green Ridge Energy. If you just Google Bitcoin mining companies, NASDAQ, you'll come across a big list of them.
Now, can you just clarify for me? I didn't put it in, but you've been talking about Bitcoin. I thought Bitcoin was one company, one type of cryptocurrency, and that we're really talking about blockchain.
Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah, Bitcoin was sort of the original blockchain. That's why I've spent so much time on it. It gets a lot of attention. But yeah, clearly, as I mentioned, this technology has all kinds of really good uses in things that have nothing to do with Bitcoin. Because it's a database of all the transactions. And whenever you're in a situation where you have a bunch of people who are accessing the same database and you don't really trust each other to get it right, but it's nice to have one database everybody agrees on, that is where blockchain technology is really useful.
Because
So
if
for
we
example,
don't, we're going to see blockchain in the future. That's just inescapable. But it seems to me that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is really one part of the neighborhood.
bingo, you got it.
And I
Yep.
probably don't want to go in that part of the neighborhood.
You got it. And you'll probably be using blockchain technology and not even knowing about it. Because, for example, think about all the different doctors we see with all their different databases that don't talk to each other. Wouldn't it be nice to have a secure database system so that all my health records from all my different providers are available to my providers, only my providers, not my next door neighbor, and that okay, whenever you have one of those situations where a lot of people have to access the same data, and you want to control who has access to it, but you also need to make sure they get it right, that is where blockchain technology is really useful. So there are people who are basically developing applications here in things like medical records, or think about car titles, all right? Okay, you go to a car dealer, you want to buy a car. All right, so obviously you're a party to the transaction. The car dealer is a party to the transaction. The car dealer's bank is probably lending money to the car dealer with that car as collateral. Or maybe the manufacturer has a hold on that car. Okay, you need some financing to get the car, so your bank has an issue on it. The state, obviously, they're involved. They want to make sure it's inspected, it's insured, the insurance company's involved. Think about all the different people who are accessing that data about who owns that car. And think about whenever there's a transaction, all the updating that occurs. Those are the kind of situations where the people go, wow, this is where a blockchain could be really useful. And this is why, staid white shirt and tie button down companies like IBM have literally been investing billions of dollars in this kind of technology, because they understand it's fundamentally a database that is very useful and has better properties than some traditional database products. Again, it gets technical. Most of us are thinking like, wow, I'm looking for a better database here. But a lot of the applications that we run into in our daily lives, whether it's medical records or car titles, well, those are the kind of areas where blockchain technology can be very, very useful. Another area where blockchain is really helpful is in keeping track of the supply chain. So for example, Walmart is really big into this. Tracking where all the produce comes that's in your produce section. So if somebody starts getting sick eating your salads, where did that salad come from? Well, with blockchain among all your suppliers, you can keep track of, this store had the salad from this box. This box came from this vendor. That vendor got it from that farm. So you're able to trace things all along the way. Or with pharmaceuticals, how do you know that that medicine that you just paid too much money for is legitimate and not counterfeit? Can you trace how it came from the factory to your pharmacy? Those are the kind of areas where blockchain technology are real and happening. So that's That's what's so cool about blockchains. The crypto side is really, that's where it got started. But once people saw how useful these things were, that's when, the IBMs and the Accentures and, big corporate America, started climbing on board. So, but let's get back to the environmental impact. Why is Bitcoin 1.0 so energy inefficient? Well, the way Bitcoin is mined, it uses a consensus mechanism to figure out, okay, we have all these independent computers out there processing transactions. How do we figure out which one, basically wins the prize and gets to say, these are the officially approved transactions, because that's what the miners do. So you want competition. You want a lot of people to be verifying the data to make sure it's right. So the idea was you have a competition and say, okay, we're going to have a race. We're going to have a math problem. And this math problem, basically the only way to solve it is through a lot of brute force guessing. You basically have to guess a big number that's going to cause an SHA-256 hash function output of the block details to have the right number of zeros in it. Yeah, so it's a very arbitrary problem. It's not one of the great puzzles in mathematics. It's just brute force guesswork. So the idea is you have all these people racing. That means you have all these people processing the transactions, and one of them wins the prize. And the prize is all the transaction fees and the newly issued Bitcoins that come from winning the race. So it's a very powerful incentive system. And that's why you literally have millions of computers right now, as we speak, all rushing to guess a big number. Now, again, remember, nobody knows who Satoshi is or was. He kind of disappeared off the scene. A lot of people have been doing a lot of guesswork on this. Some of the people who've been accused of being Satoshi, like my former classmate Hal Finney, have passed away and can't prove or deny it. But so basically Bitcoin is whatever the majority of the miners say it is. Whatever they're willing to process, that's what it is. So there's a real social issue about governance of Bitcoin 1.0, as I call it. But it was really brilliant viral marketing. If there were a Nobel Prize in marketing, and there isn't, it should go to Satoshi Nakamoto, because crypto started among the computer side people. These were not economists who knew monetary history. If they had been, they would have gone, what? Starting a new currency to compete with national governments? That's a loser. Everybody who's tried that has failed for the last 300 years, because our governments have a nice habit of basically pushing private monies aside, because the governments like the profit from printing these things. Okay, but they didn't know any better, so they just started saying, wow, we're going to print money on our computers. Way cool, man. So they started doing it. And then they noticed they had nothing to spend it on. So in order to make their investment profitable, they had to go out and market Bitcoin. They had to become evangelists to tell everybody in the world that this is the greatest thing. So it's like an airplane scheme or a Ponzi scheme, where basically or a pyramid scheme really, where in order for your investment to pay off, you need to bring in more people into the pyramid scheme. And so whenever you see anybody who is spreading the word about, yeah, this is the greatest thing, of course it's wonderful, it's going to go to $1 million of Bitcoin. Well, they've already bought in and drunk the Kool-Aid. And in order for their investment to be worth anything, they need to get you to buy in. Okay. And so this is a great business model. You start a new cryptocurrency, and in the early days, you reserve a bunch of it to yourself. And then you convince the rest of the world that it is really valuable. And some people have made a lot of money this way. Wish I'd thought of it. Now, we mentioned blockchain uses already. So let me just, real quickly, point out that a blockchain is just a database. It's a log of all the transactions it has some nice features so you can easily spot any tampering with it. And it's got a mechanism to agree upon for the updates. And because you have multiple processors processing the data, you have multiple copies, that means it's very, very unlikely that the data gets lost. And as I mentioned, before, car titles, again, think about all the people out there who are shuffling paper, when you buy a car, when you finance the car, when you pay off the car, when you trade in the car, that, you just have, all kinds of people involved in that. So why not have a system in which you have a central database built on a blockchain system? And indeed, there's a system in process that's being rolled out now, places like Ohio, where all those different people, all the different people involved in that title can access the database. And again, most of the people using that aren't even going to know it's a blockchain. Now, in the interest of time, we'll talk a little bit more about the use cases for Bitcoin. I am a bit skeptic. Do I think digital currencies should be regulated? Yes, and I'll get into that, time permitting. Is blockchain the reason there's so many data centers in Northern Virginia? Probably not. We were a data center mecca long before blockchain became a thing. And the reason is twofold. One, Washington is a big consumer of data, so it's a good place for data centers. We're far enough from New York that we provide a nice bit of geographic diversity. So if one of Vladimir Putin's missiles wipes out New York City, well, Ashburn hopefully will still be here. Big data centers are out in Ashburn. Also the electricity in Northern Virginia is not as expensive as in some other places as well. So anyhow, Bitcoin was designed as a payment system. And as soon as I found out about it, I played with it and went, man, this thing is clunky. Okay, so I have to put this software on my phone. And if some hacker breaks into my phone, there goes all my money. And, oh, I want to send some money to somebody. Oh, it takes 10 minutes to process this block. But it's really cheap to do this. So a lot of people say, oh, remittances. Let's help poor migrant workers send money back to feed their families back home. Sounds great in theory. There are plenty of other solutions out there. That's not the only way to do that. The preppers view Bitcoin as something that will exist even if governments fail. And they point to the Venezuelas of the world and say, hey, look, that when the Fed waters down the money, the Bitcoins will still be there. Well, maybe, but if that happens, will there be any electricity to run the internet? Probably not. And some will say, oh, this is the basis for the world's new monetary system. But getting back to the regulation question, there are really good reasons why we, the people, demand regulation of our financial systems. We want to make sure money's not stolen from our bank account or our wallets. We want to make sure that we're not being sold fraudulent items. We want to make sure that the system isn't going to collapse and cause unemployment. We want to make sure that businesses can get the funding they need to grow, and people get the credit they need to make their lives work. And that's why we regulate financial services so strictly. And so that those reasons aren't going away. Now, for a monetary system, we had this long flirtation with gold in the 19th century, and it never worked. It kept blowing up every 10 years in the equivalent of a Great Recession or Great Depression. And you look at US financial history, 19th century, it was panic after crisis after panic. So there are good reasons why every country on the planet abandoned the gold system. It just didn't work. So having a very inflexible system doesn't really make sense, especially one that's not under control of the people. And as far as financial inclusion goes, less than 1.2% of the population owns 100% of the Bitcoins. And so let's start off with a brand new monetary system where a few rich people already own everything. So if you think current wealth is unequal, Bitcoin is far, far worse. So as you can see, I'm a bit skeptic about Bitcoin 1.0. As far as the valuation goes, it's basically a lottery ticket. Some people believe, yes, it will be the basis of a brand new order. It will be worth millions. I think your chances of winning the mega millions are probably higher than that. But I could be wrong, and many people disagree with me. But one thing we know, the price is very volatile. It can easily go up or down 10% in a day. Not the kind of stable thing you want to be putting next week's rent into. So let's talk about the environmental impact. How much energy is being used right now in Bitcoin mining? Cambridge University.
Can I just interrupt you on this question? Because this
Sure.
is, I'm really interested in knowing if we are talking about the same level of energy usage for any blockchain?
Oh, great question. The answer is no.
Okay. So this
The
is about
newer blockchains use a consensus mechanism that is very different from the proof of work from Bitcoin 1.0. Just like modern automobiles are very different from the Model T Ford in many ways. And the one of the other big ones called Ethereum, which is a programmable platform for smart contracts, is right now switching from proof of work, which is very inefficient, to proof of stake, which is a way of being much, much, much more energy efficient. You don't need to have millions of computers processing the same transaction, which is the horrendous inefficiency of Bitcoin.
Good. So I just wanted to make sure I'm not going to be painting with the broad brush all blockchain.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But and all the commercial blockchains that do things like health records, car titles, things like that, they are not proof of work systems. Most of them use other consensus mechanisms that have all kinds of colorful names like Byzantine fault tolerance and things like that. But anyways, Cambridge University has a nice website where they calculate the energy consumption of Bitcoin. As an electrical engineer, I've done my own independent calculations, and my calculations are very similar. I think theirs are a bit conservative. They say it's 15 gigawatts. I think it's closer to 19, but I'm willing to go with their numbers. So how much energy is 15 gigawatts? Well, one large nuclear reactor like at Chernobyl is the equivalent of about 1 gigawatt. On average, the Fukushima reactors are a little under a gigawatt. So just the mining that we're seeing happening right now for Bitcoin is the equivalent of 15 Chernobyl power plants running around the clock. And all this for just really only a few transactions per second. Now, I did not have room in my slides for all 15 pictures of Chernobyl, so here's another one just to get across. We are talking about a massive amount of electricity. We have these mining firms out there that literally are signing up for hundreds of megawatts of electricity, and they're like locusts. They go wherever all the cheap electricity is and use it up and drive up the cost for the rest of us. On average, each of those transactions, if you look at how much energy the Bitcoin network is using and divide by the number of transactions, you get about $60 worth of electricity for every transaction. That's how much electricity they are squandering. And it's not nuclear power they're using. It's not moonbeams and rainbows and unicorns. It's fossil-based. The marginal electricity on this planet is generated by fossil fuels. And even if some mining company out there like Greenwood says, oh, we signed a contract to get this solar energy from this solar plant. That's just FUD. You know, like the tobacco companies telling you that tobacco is good for you. No, because what happens is when you add additional load to an electrical system, it's going to generate more electricity. Now, you know, the solar and wind power and nuclear power that comes in to a grid, that's basically fixed. You get what you've got right now. You turn on one more light switch, the electrical grid responds, and it basically burns a little bit more fossil fuel, usually natural gas. That's what's driving our marginal electricity here. And so that's 15 gigawatts worth of carbon dioxide being thrown into the atmosphere. And most of that's natural gas. And when you look what's happening to fuel prices this winter, my calculations are that Bitcoin mining in the US alone has probably added about 4% to your winter heating bill. So when you see your heating bills, you know, just look at that, look at, 4% of that. So, you got that $200 heating bill, and you can say $8 of that is because of the Bitcoin miners. And again, they're waging a FUD campaign, just like the tobacco and the oil companies saying, oh, no, our Bitcoins are coming from rainbows and unicorns. Nah. Then they'll come back and say, what about traditional finance? Well, traditional payments are really cheap. If you look at that ACH payment where your Social Security check is coming directly into your bank account, banks charge wholesale about 5 cents for that. If a merchant wants to do it, it's maybe 15 cents. That's basically only about 3 kilowatt hours at most for all the costs involved. So we can see that Bitcoin in its present incarnation is about 400 times more energy intensive than other payment systems. It really is an energy and environmental disaster. Now, but I have 3 minutes left. I know we're running out of time. Bitcoin has led to a whole category of digital assets. And remember, as I said at the beginning, we can tokenize anything. We tokenize shares of stock, or we did in the old days with pieces of paper. So we have a whole number of these applications where very clever people have come up with all kinds of things, whether it's recording car ownership like a car title, or issuing securities in different ways. Again, I teach whole courses in this stuff, so I can go on to this stuff for hours and hours. But the cool thing is many of these digital assets can be programmable, and you can do all kinds of really fun things. And that brings us to smart contracts. And basically, think of it as computer software that automatically executes a transaction. That, if you know how options work, think about an option that exercises itself under the right circumstances. But of course, with a smart contract, you need somebody to run the computer. You need to pay them to run the computer. That's where you get up with Ethereum. Ethereum is kind of like Bitcoin. It uses the same kind of blockchain technology, but they're switching to a more energy efficient one. But it's programmable with its own little language, so you can actually run smart contracts on there. So most of the NFTs that you see are run on platforms similar to Ethereum. It's not the only one out there. And basically, the people who process the transactions get paid in the new Ether tokens. And if you want somebody to execute your transaction, you pay them with the Ether tokens. So the Ether tokens are fundamentally the gas that we use to execute these smart contracts. And I'll talk a little bit about NFTs again. So remember that blockchains allow you to transfer any kind of a token of value. Whoever has that private key controls it. Well, just like you can tokenize shares of stock, you can tokenize money, you can also tokenize collectibles like baseball cards. Now, the ones that are fungible, like dollar bills, perfect substitutes. If it's not fungible, it can represent a piece of art, a car title, or all kinds of things. So this is where, as I mentioned before, you see a lot of art, a lot of digital art is being sold this way, and people are going, ooh, ah. Now, why people are paying that much for it? Prestige goods are a weird part of the economy. People are willing to pay a lot of money to basically prove they're rich and prove they're patrons of the arts and pay all kinds of stuff. God bless them, they support the arts. And but trying to figure out how much it's worth is beyond my pay grade. But I see that it's 10 o'clock, and I want to thank you all for coming and listening to me. I'll stick around afterwards for a few questions for a few minutes. What's the societal, I'll answer one last question. What's the societal advantage of the Bitcoin concept? And it's basically, what is it? I'd say the idea of blockchain technology, very, very useful. The idea of digital bearer assets, also very useful, as we see with these NFTs. You may have heard of Web3 in the metaverse, where people are actually creating entertainment venues in cyberspace and allowing you to buy property there. And so, wow, people are going, hey, imagine setting up an amusement park where instead of just paying to get in, you can actually own property there. So imagine, if you're thinking of starting a business, imagine the ability to own property inside Disney World. So that's why you're seeing this sort of land rush in the so-called metaverse, and why firms like Facebook have gone, ooh, meta. But we're out of time. And with that, I'll turn it over to the organizers.
Yeah.
And,
thank you. Thank you, Jim. We can't thank you enough for this incredibly in-depth look at new technologies that are going to affect us. There's no question we should not turn away from them. We should not hope that they just don't develop, because they're already here and up and running. Plus, I think what I'm taking away today is a couple things that I'm going to pay attention to: blockchain upside, to blockchain technology. I'd love to have all of my medical records organized in such a way that they're going to be actually useful, and I don't have to keep entering the same information over and over again. And I think it's also important for us, as you've pointed out very well here, that any new technology that promises wealth and happiness and utopia, at this stage in our Earth's development, has to be considered against the climate change issues. And we really just can't go headlong into hoping that things are going to just sort themselves out when you have clearly quantified how much of an impact there is on our need for fossil fuels and the things that cause climate change. So that really was very, very helpful for us. And we're going to try to be positive about it all. This was perfect for seniors, presented in English, not gobbledygook. Thank you. And thanks so much. And good luck to you and all of your students.
Why, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And I wish all of you a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.